All right, I wanted to show you heroes a little book haul I had from some thrift stores out here in the boonies. Now, it's been my experience that thrift stores are probably the cheapest place to buy books at, but they're not my personal favorite because usually what happens is that the owner of used bookstores will go in there and clean them out of anything more desirable. They'll buy it all as like a big bulk lot for 25 cents a piece and then put it on their own shelves for $3. So I find that they're usually slim pickings. But I had a free day to work with and I had to run into town for some other errands anyways. So I ended up hitting 5 thrift shops in my area, and this is what I grabbed. The first one was at a little town of 1,000 people, which is actually the largest town in my county. So we're very rural out here. The cows outnumber the people, which is how I like it. But all their books were 50 cents and magazines 25 cents. They had a really good shape copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. Every time somebody brings up a revenge story, it always gets compared to this, so it's one I've always wanted to read. I had Edward Rutherford's Serum. This is one I read about 15 years ago and really loved this book. The old copy that I had was just falling apart and didn't make it in my move down here, so I was happy to find a copy for 50 cents. One of my favorite historical fictions I've ever read. This Louis Lamore, The Cherokee Trail, with a beautiful Lou, what was his name? Lou Glanzman cover on it. Wraps around. Just beautiful. I'm not a big Western reader, so I'm just kind of getting introduced to it. Now I'm willing to give it a try. Saga of the Volsungs, the old Viking Age poems, Icelandic Sagas. This is the kind of stuff that Tolkien was studying as a literature professor, and it inspired his writings. So any old Norse or Celtic mythology, legend stuff, I grab all of it whenever I see it. Jack O'Connor is my favorite of the old school gun writers. All of the new gun writers today are just bought and paid for shills. You know, they're pushing products for the manufacturers because that's what makes them money. I don't pay attention to any of them. I'd rather just read something from Jack O'Connor back in the 70s. This is an Outdoor Life publication. Back then, you know, Outdoor Life was the magazine for outdoorsmen. And there was another one in the series there, How to Call Wildlife. This is meant for both hunters and for, nature photographers and things. So my whole life, I've always collected anything about primitive living skills and survival and stuff like that. I just love all that stuff. Second store only had 2 books I found, and they were 10 cents a piece. First one was James Misher's Mexico. I had read his Chesapeake, about the Chesapeake Bay, and Centennial about Colorado, and loved those both. So anytime I could find one of his for 10 cents, that's a great deal. He was actually probably the influence for Edward Rutherford's novels. They work kind of the same way, where they take a specific area. In the case of Serum, that's the area around Salisbury, England, and this Mexico, of course, and just start at the beginning of civilization there and take it up to the modern day. So they're more of a big picture sort of historical fiction, not quite so focused on one time period and one group of people. It's more like it'll follow a family through generations through the various historical events that happen and affect their lives. Then there's this Lois McMaster Bujold. She's mostly known for her science fiction. I read a handful of her Vorkosigan saga. I really liked a couple of them, and then a couple of them were just, not so much. So I just didn't continue with them. But this is a standalone fantasy, so for 10 cents, can't go wrong gambling on that. Third place only had one book for $1. This is the first of the Foxfire series. Back in the 60s, this high school teacher did a project with his students where he had them interview some of the old-timey mountain people and ask them about their old way of doing things from the turn of the century through the Great Depression and that. And when they did it, he found that the information they were accumulating was historically important. So he ended up working with them, and they put out a quarterly magazine all the way through the 70s and that, collecting it. And then it was collected in the book series like this, anthologies of the information. And I've got a couple of them. And again, if you're into the old ways of doing things and primitive skills and that, this is the kind of stuff. This has hog dressing, log cabin building, snake lore, planting by the signs, faith healing, and moonshining. Moonshining. So if I come upon hard times, maybe I'll just brew me up some white lightning out here. No, I'm actually not a drinker at all. It's been probably over 10 years since I last had a drink of alcohol. So the fourth store only had one book for 25 cents, and that's Ruska, again from Edward Rutherford, another one of his. Like Serum is about England, this one is about Russia. So it looks like I have some historical fiction ahead of me in the near future. Nothing wrong with that. In the fifth thrift store I stopped at, didn't have a single book I wanted. I felt weird just walking out without getting anything, so I picked a DVD, a horror movie I hadn't seen before. So that was 5 thrift stores, 10 books that cost a total of $4.45. So the price is right, but 5 stores pretty much ate up my entire day to stop at and, thumb through all their unorganized shelves at. So I value my time. Is it worth it to get 10 books for that cheap of a price? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you heroes can chime in with your opinion on it. What's it like in your area? What's your experience hitting up thrift stores for books? I'd be curious to hear if it's like that in other places too, or if it's a little bit different. Because it is very rural out here, so things do happen differently than a lot of other places. But I had to stop in Hot Springs for other errands. So while I was there, I hit their Books A Million, which is the big chain bookstore we have here. I had a $5 off coupon, and my discount membership is about to expire, and I'm not going to renew it because I just don't ever buy brand new books all that often. They're just, I find them to be too expensive. I think the last time I was in there was about 6 months ago, and I bought 4 mass market paperbacks. Okay, so nothing fancy, but those 4 books with tax totaled almost $50, and it's just getting too pricey. Maybe for somebody who only reads a few books a year, the price is really negligible. It's not a big deal. But when you start reading more, like I'm going to burn through those 4 books in 2 weeks. That's just getting too expensive. So I'm just going to have to mostly stick with used ones I can find at a good price. But there I did find Michael Crichton's Timeline. I had read his Jurassic Park shortly after the movie came out way back in the day. And I've always told myself I've got to read more of his stuff, but for some reason I just never have. Well, then recently I was watching a video from Reading with Rachel, and she's a huge fan of his. And she did a ranking of her top 10 of his books. And when I was watching it, I was just like, yeah, I've got to read Timeline and Sphere. For whatever reason, those two are just calling out for me. So in the near future, I'm going to have to check those out. So I'll leave a link below to that video if any you other heroes are interested in hearing about Michael Crichton from somebody who's read a bunch of his. And then Josh Malerman's Incidents Around the House. I recently read and reviewed his Bird Box and just loved that one. So I saw this too, which is it seems about like a haunted house. There's this 8-year-old girl, and of course her family things going on in the house, but there's this malevolent entity named Other Mommy, and Other Mommy keeps asking her, "Can I go inside your heart?" Wow. So in addition to like the this haunting sort of thing going on in the house, I guess there's like rifts coming in the parents' marriage and so domestic problems in addition to the haunting problems. And just knowing how he just was so intense in some moments in Bird Box, and just the story of this is like, yeah, that's one I'm just going to have to read. And then when I was about to shoot this video, I heard the mail lady pull up out at the road and drop off my package from Thrift Books, so I figure I'll show those too. A little bit more horror. Elias Wither's The Black Farm. I've heard that this one is full of trigger warnings, not for the faint of heart, very nasty kind of book, but it's supposedly very interesting, very scary, and some excellent, unique world building in it. So I'll check that out. And Adam Neville, No One Gets Out Alive. Again, I've heard that Adam Neville is one of the better of the modern horror writers. I love horror. I haven't been reading nearly enough of it lately, so I'm hoping to check out more of it. A lot of the synopses of his books look really cool to me, so I'll check this one out and see if I want to try more of his. And then Michael McDowell's Blackwater. This is an omnibus series of them. They were originally released in the 80s as 6 separate books, but it was just too hard to find the individual 6 volumes, especially at a decent price. So this omnibus edition is easier to come across. I don't care for the cover of it. I mean, it kind of makes it look like YA when it's actually like a Southern Gothic horror. But I'm doing a buddy read of this starting up next month in July with Anna from Book Dreamer's Alley. So yeah, we're going to try this out. It looks like it's going to be a good summer type read. Good, nasty Southern horror. So let me know what you guys got coming in that you're going to be reading soon, all right? And I will see you penny pinching heroes in our next thrift store adventure.